All right. So tonight we will begin this new course, Advice for Life. Up until now, all the courses were about specific topics through the lens of Chassidus or through the lens of Kabbalah, discussing Kabbalistic ideas in particular, which was last course, which was quite heavy, lots of uh, depth, lots of intense readings and ideas. But this course is a little bit different. This course is a very perhaps relaxed course, informative, practical ideas. And what's unique about it as well is the idea of how many video clips we will playing, because the concept of the course is advice from the Rebbe, and what best to hear this advice than from the Rebbe himself. And what I mean by that is um, we have thousands of hours of video clips from the Rebbe, whether it's his talks, his Hasidic gatherings, or his some of his meetings one-on-one of people having these conversations with the Rebbe, of seeking the advice in various areas of life, as well as first-person accounts of people relaying these pieces of advice that they received from the Rebbe. And so, what better way of imparting this advice than from hearing it directly from the Rebbe or the people that heard it directly from the Rebbe? Um, Being the Rebbe's representative here in Mar Vista makes this course more exciting, more personal for me. And I am very thrilled and energized to be giving this course. Many of these ideas that we will be speaking about throughout the next 6 weeks are ideas that you may have heard me share with you. You may have heard me discuss some of these topics, be it in the emails, on Shabbos, or in the Farbrengens, various classes in the past. But it's important to go through these 6 general ideas of life in a kind of comprehensive um, overview of these concepts. And so the 4 topics the 6 topics, excuse me, that we will be discussing over the course of the next 6 weeks will be meaning at work, which is tonight. We will discuss the benefits of work and everything that comes along with that. Next week will be family dynamics. The third week will be about health. Week lesson 4 will be healthy at heart, feelings, relationships. Lesson 5 will be with how to deal with adversity, challenges, etc. And lesson 6 will be about spiritual areas in life. So those 6 general concepts kind of cover all 6 large areas of life. Another point I want to mention by way of introduction is that yes, this course is advice for life, but as with perhaps not to compare, but to a degree, any self-help book, there's going to be chapters that perhaps we don't feel is directly related to us. So there's going to be certain aspects of this course that isn't direct advice for ourselves. Yet these ideas are perhaps can give us some perspective on Judaism's perspective on these areas in life, even if they aren't directly related to us. And we can definitely benefit from studying Judaism's perspectives on these various ideas. And we can definitely glean some ideas. Talking about self-help, they say the story where a guy walks into Barnes and Nobles and walks over to one of the people there and one of the workers and says, "Excuse me, where can I help? Where can I find the self-help section?" And the worker there at Barnes and Noble says, "If I tell you, that'll defeat the purpose." Um, self-help, the idea of advice, it's us, what we do with the advice, which is most important. As we say, the guy comes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, my foot's hurting me, my stomach's hurting me, my head's hurting me." And after going on a long slew of things, the doctor checks him out and gives him a list of things and says, "Look, I think you should, better your diet. You should change your schedule around a little bit." And after giving him this whole list, the doctor says, "All right, it's going to be $500." And the guy says, "$500 for what?" And he says, "$500 for the advice I just gave you." He says, "Well, who's taking your advice?" Yeah, advice is for taking. And so it's really what we do with the advice and what we make of it. which is really what makes it more meaningful. So just before we get into it, a little overview of the Rebbe. The Rebbe was born in Ukraine in 1902, and the Rebbe is perhaps universally recognized as one of the most impactful Jewish leaders of the post-Holocaust world. In 1950, the Rebbe assumed leadership of Chabad, which was a very, very small organization. Back in Russia and the Ukraine and the former Soviet Union, Chabad was a very large organization that was decimated during the Stalinist Russia and the Holocaust. By decimated, it lost tens of thousands, if not more, hundreds of thousands of followers. By the time the Rebbe assumed leadership of Chabad in 1950, there were just a few hundred, perhaps 1,000 or so followers of the Rebbe that were still around. And when the Rebbe assumed leadership and formally gave his first Hasidic discourse as Rebbe in the small synagogue in Crown Heights known as 770, which we're definitely going to hear more about, that building, 770, Chabad World Headquarters. It's called 770 because that is the address, 770 Eastern Parkway, but it's universally known as 770, and it's the most replicated building in the entire world. There are some 40 or 50 replicas of the building of 770, really testament to the lights and positivity that emanates from that building. And so when the Rebbe first gave that Hasidic discourse in that small synagogue in the building in 770, there were maybe a couple hundred people there. Yet the Rebbe transformed Chabad into an internationally recognized organization, and the idea was to love your fellow as yourself, to spread Judaism, to teach Torah, and be there for anyone at any point, anywhere in the world, which is why Chabad, the Rebbe has grown Chabad to over 5,000 outposts throughout the entire world. Here in Vista is one of them. But really, in any place you go, many of us can say testament to the places that we've been, that we visited Chabad, be it somewhere random in the American outback, as I like to call the flyover states, or some exotic place in the islands. We've met Chabad, we've encountered their what they do, and we've seen their selflessness, really. And that's all thanks to the Rebbe really seeing the world and having a vision different than any other Jewish leader. Together with that, being the great leader and transforming the Jewish world and really in turn the entire world as we know it, the Rebbe is also a transformative scholar, Torah scholar. The Rebbe's scholarship is vast. The Rebbe's published works is more than 300 volumes, and the Rebbe's scholarship really was seen and sought after far and wide by great rabbis and great Jewish thinkers and academics throughout the ages. And many of us can attest to that. Perhaps we may not be such great scholars, but we can attest to the fact that we studied many of the Rebbe's teachings throughout the courses here and various other classes, which is why, generally speaking, because of the great leadership skills and the Rebbe's great scholarship, the Rebbe is always referred to simply as the Rebbe. When you say the Rebbe, everyone knows who we're talking about. Similarly to 770, when we say 770, we know which building is being spoken about. It doesn't need an address. It just is known as 770. And the Rebbe is known as the Rebbe. And so for the first clip of today, I'd like to show just a little clip of various leaders and noted personalities discussing the Rebbe's extraordinary leadership skills and the Rebbe's scholarship. Just a moment while I pull it up here. Yeah.
It isn't only the Jewish community that values him, it's the worldwide community. And so many come here to receive his blessing.
Today, the Rebbe will be posthumously awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. A man who dedicated his life to helping others and to bringing people together. The Speaker of the House and I have many disagreements, but there's one thing, there is at least one thing on which we do agree. That is the awarding of this medal. This award, it brought Democrats and Republicans, liberals, conservatives, northerners and southerners, blacks, whites, and Hispanics. It brought us all together.
I remember the 70th birthday. People say that he was the new Baal Shem Tov. I rather compared him to the Maggid of Meserich. Although he never moved, he didn't travel. The Maggid of Meserich was the one actually who had built. The Rebbe was like the Maggid. He had vision and wisdom and knowledge and everything else, but in practical life, he was an architect. He knew whom to send where. I think the Shaliach himself didn't know why he was sent somewhere, but he knew. The Rebbe was an architect in this part, in this respect. He knew how to build.
And therefore, I have asked for the blessings of the Rabbi, of our great teacher. Rabbi Schneerson is a great man in Israel. All of us respect him. All of us accept his judgment. He is a great lover of the house of Israel. He has shown his deep sentiment and love for our children. His blessings are very important to me. I do hope they will strengthen me on that very important mission I am going to fulfill during the meetings with President Carter, the President of the United States.
A unique personality, no doubt, that serves as a leader for tremendous number of Jewish people. A person that on one hand lives in the world of the Torah, but has got practical sense to the realities of the life everywhere in the world, and great sensitivity for the preserving of the Jewish people.
All right. So this idea of these various personalities is contrasted by the flip side, and that is it's not just great world leaders and noble personalities who would come and meet the Rebbe. The Rebbe was sought after by men, women, children, great world leaders, and ordinary people like you and me who would flock to the Rebbe, not just to seek blessings and, from a spiritual perspective, but perhaps more so advice, literal advice on what to do in any situation. You name it, whether it is a prime minister discussing a military strategic battle, or it's a little child asking the Rebbe for advice on how to deal with her teacher, and everything in between, house, family, relationships, work, it didn't matter. People came to the Rebbe and wrote letters to the Rebbe asking for advice. So much so that the USPS, the Postal Service, relates that the Rebbe received more mail than most people in the United States, one of the most. If I'm not mistaken, the Rebbe received the most mail in the state of New York. At one year, the Rebbe received more than 90,000 pieces of mail, letters. I'm not talking spam here. The Rebbe received on average 400 or 500 pieces of mail a day. The mailmen would deliver mail to 770, these large sacks of mail, sometimes multiple times a day. The mail would be delivered to 770, addressed to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would open each and every single piece of mail by himself, by hand. And the Rebbe would read every single piece of mail. The responses to those pieces of mail is what the bulk of this course is based on. Those responses and the one-on-one, face-to-face conversations that world leaders, notable people, and ordinary people had with the Rebbe throughout the decades that the Rebbe gave this advice. Which leads us to an interesting question that we will address really at the end of the class. But the question really is, coming to a Rebbe for blessings is understood. Coming to the Rebbe for perhaps scholarly questions understood. But what's with the questions in law? What's with the questions in medical scenarios? Why would people come to the Rebbe with those questions? And perhaps why would the Rebbe respond to these people? Was the Rebbe a lawyer? Was the Rebbe a doctor? And we see the Rebbe does address these questions. Why were people addressing these questions to the Rebbe? And what information, and with the power of what insight, did the Rebbe respond to these questions? And so we're going to get to that towards the end of tonight's lesson. But tonight's lesson, we will focus on the subjects of work, career, and money, and the uniqueness of the Rebbe's guidance in these areas. So we're going to begin with an interesting point. And the interesting point is as follows. We're all familiar with the statement, there are no atheists in foxholes, right? No atheists in foxholes. And what does that mean? Generally speaking, that's understood to be that when we're in a bind, when we're in a tough spot, everyone turns to God. Which would mean that the flip side would be that there are atheists outside of foxholes. In other words, when life is well, when everything is gung-ho, when everything is perfect, there are atheists. Why? Because if everything's going well, why do I need to turn to the supreme being? Why do I need to turn to Torah? Why do I need to turn to God? If everything's going well, as the famous story goes, where Jack has an important meeting at 10 o'clock, it's 5 to 10. He comes to the parking lot, it's bustling with cars. There isn't an empty spot. He's waiting. It's 2 minutes to 10. It's an important meeting. He can't miss it. And he turns to God and he says, God, if you get me a parking spot, I will go to synagogue this Shabbos. And he waits 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It feels like forever, and there's still no parking spot. And he ups the game, and he says, God, look, if you find me a parking spot, I will go to shul every single week for the next 4 weeks. Another 30 seconds is 1 minute to 10 o'clock. He's got to be by this meeting. He ups the ante, and he says, God, I will go to shul for every week for the next 4 weeks, and I will give 20% of this deal to charity. And as he's saying that, a car right in front of him pulls out of his spot. He pulls into the spot and he turns to God and he says, God, the deal's off. I found a spot. There are no atheists in foxholes, and perhaps when we're outside of foxholes, perhaps there is some space of saying, I'm comfortable. Why do I need to look to God? Which brings about an interesting question. What is Torah's view on wealth? What is Torah's view on pursuing wealth? Is pursuing wealth something that, from the Torah's view, we should stay away from? Just be comfortable. Don't go ahead and try to chase wealth, because, hey, once we get comfortable, we don't know where that's going to lead, and Judaism doesn't want us to lead us astray. And if we get too comfortable, then we start turning away from God. Or do we say no? We should chase it. What is a Jewish view? So if you look in the books in text 1, for those of you who haven't, we have 2 quotes here. One is from the book of Deuteronomy and the other from the book of Proverbs, which gives us a very seemingly straightforward view that wealth is not something that we should chase after. Perhaps it gives us the view that we should be wary of wealth. Let's look in Deuteronomy. The verse says as follows: Jeshurun, Israel, grew fat and kicked, rebelled. You grew fat, thick, and rotund. Israel forsook the God who made them and spurned the rock of their salvation. Perhaps a paraphrasing of atheists outside of the foxhole, right? The idea of people becoming too wealthy, that's what the commentaries explain, that's what the verses are talking about, growing, and suddenly that will bring to rebelling, because once you are wealthy, once one becomes too comfortable, then they will, God forbid, forsake God who made them and spurn the rock of their salvation. And King Solomon in Proverbs says as well, a poor person speaks with supplications, a rich person replies with impudence. So perhaps these two verses give us a understanding of why we do find that throughout the ages, Jews seem to be weary of material success. We're not talking about the ones who weren't able to. We're not talking about the times in the Shtetl when they were very poor, but we're talking about the times when they had the ability, but yet they turned away from it and they were wary of it because perhaps it can lead to indulgence, it can lead to self-absorption, and ultimately to deep prioritizing God. It can lead to arrogance, it can lead to an unhealthy sense of self-importance and disrespect for others. And perhaps historically, that's why Jews were wary of material success. Yet we look at the Rebbe's position on wealth and we see something remarkable. The Rebbe had the exact opposite position. The Rebbe said this challenge that wealth perhaps poses is a challenge that we should embrace. It's a challenge that we should seek. It's a challenge that we should have over the challenge of poverty. One of the earlier times we see the Rebbe addresses this idea is in 1958. The Rebbe visited a Rebbe of a different Hasidic dynasty known as the Kapishnitzar. The Kapishnitzar dynasty, Rabbi Heschel was his name. His name was Rabbi Avram Yeshua Heschel. You may be familiar somewhat with his cousin, whose name was Abraham Joshua Heschel. But Abraham Joshua Heschel had a cousin who was a great Hasidic Rebbe, whose name was Rabbi Avram Yeshua Heschel. And the Rebbe visited him, paid a Shiva call to him, and they had a discussion of various Torah areas, including a conversation about this topic, the challenge of wealth. Let's have a look in text 2, where we have a transcript of this conversation from 1958. And the Rebbe says as follows. This is on page 6 if you have the student book. The Rebbe said, Jewish individuals need to secure financial security, and that is an important, positive, and appropriate goal in and of itself, regardless of the additional imperative to fund Torah institutions in specific locations. Financial success enables Jews to live comfortably and expansively, and that will also enable them to broaden their perspectives. For our sages taught that a beautiful home expands one's mind. And they meant that in the most literal sense, if only all Jewish people would be wealthy. And so the Kapishnitzar responded, wealth is a challenge. I fear the test that it poses. And the Rebbe responded, poverty is equally a challenge. If there must be a challenge, the test of wealth is preferable over that of poverty. God will certainly help us successfully withstand the challenge. And we see that the Rebbe actually circles back. The conversation continues for some 5, 10, 15 minutes. And at the end of the conversation, the Rebbe circles back to this. And the Rebbe says to the Kapishnitzar, to Rabbi Heschel, the Rebbe says, I'd like you to agree that Jews should be blessed with wealth. And Rabbi Heschel responds that he wholeheartedly agrees. And so, yes, as we see from this text and this conversation that Rebbe has, is that wealth is a test, but poverty is also a test of faith. And so let's have and embrace the challenge of wealth rather than the challenge of poverty. We see this concept in another idea, and we'll show the video, but before we get to the video, this was a very unique and remarkable occasion, Purim of 1955. See, every single holiday the Rebbe would hold a Hasidic gathering where thousands of Hasidim would be there, various Jews would be there in the hall, and the Rebbe would share various Torah ideas. And at this specific Farbrengen, after sharing a number of Torah ideas pertaining to the holiday of Purim and other things that were going on, suddenly the Rebbe started speaking about this topic. And the Rebbe spoke about the challenges that poverty presents and the challenges that wealth presents. Yet the Rebbe said that the challenges of wealth is something that we should embrace. And then the Rebbe says something drastic. The Rebbe says, whoever would like to be rich and whoever would like to be wealthy should raise their hands. And we'll see what happens. The Rebbe spoke in Yiddish. There are subtitles on the bottom, and hopefully when I share it, it's viewable and it's easy to follow. I will paraphrase at the end in case someone misses it. Here's the clip.
We'll start with Purim 1955, when the Rebbe spoke about the test of wealth, and then made an incredible offer.
Der Mitzrayim von Aschiris ist sehr schwerer Mitzrayim, von deswegen allweil alle Juden gesagt geworden, sollen alle werden geblieben. In Amerika ist Minig, jede Sache stellt nach Wut als Abstimmung. In die was eine Maske im Annehmen als hier, der Rebbe soll sie geben, Aschire ist der Affloge. Und sie hat nicht der Haravani, was sie und der darf willkommen haben. Mit dem Jetzer Horror soll sie nicht Machschel sein, soll nur heben der rechte Hand, der Leben Scholem.
We were sitting by a Farbrengen, and the Rebbe said that anyone who wants to become wealthy, raise your hands. Now, who has the audacity that I should ask the Rebbe about Gashmias? The Rebbe is for Ruchnistik, so most of the people wouldn't have the audacity to raise their hand.
Reb Shmuel Isaac Popak was said to have raised his hand, a fact that he would never confirm or deny, although he always told the story.
6 or 7 people raised their hands, and they all became millionaires. Subsequently, I asked the Rebbe for a broche. I had no parnosa at all, and the Rebbe told me I should go into real estate, which I did. And I told the Rebbe I had no money. The Rebbe says, you don't need money to go into real estate. So through certain maneuvering, we were able to buy 2 houses without any cash. That started us off in the real estate business, and thank God we make a living.
So the Rebbe said that whoever would like to have the challenge of riches should raise their hand, and very few people raised their hand. There were hundreds of people in the room, yet very few people raised their hand. 6 or 7 people raised their hand, and they all became millionaires. Now, Rabbi Shmuel Isaac Popak, he was there. He raised his hand. He, as the video says, he never confirmed or denied, but there were people there who watched him raise his hand, and he subsequently became a millionaire. And it made no sense because he came from a place of no livelihood. He had no parnasa whatsoever. And yet, almost miraculously, he became wealthy and became a great philanthropist as well. But so we see this idea is this idea that the Rebbe said, although perhaps Torah or historically Jews have been weary of riches, the Rebbe said that's a challenge that we definitely should embrace. And the obvious question is why? Why would the Rebbe advocate for affluence? What is the in it spiritually, so to speak? And to appreciate this idea, we're going to zero in on the idea of work in general, and that'll give us an appreciation to understand the why for the affluence question. When you look at work, right, day-to-day work, we go to work every day, right? People go to work for decades. People go to work. What is the purpose of work? So many people see work, even if you enjoy the work, even if you enjoy what you're doing, but perhaps work is a necessary evil. In other words, it's not evil literally, but it's something that, if we had an opportunity and we had that much money in the bank, we wouldn't go to work every single day. Perhaps we do something, but it's not something that we want to do. We do it because we got to put bread on the table. We do it because we need to earn a livelihood to support our family, to support what we do. The Rebbe's view was entirely different. The Rebbe's view is that every single part of life is purposeful, including one's career. Work, financial success is not a means to an end. It's also that, but it's an end of itself. It's not something which is a livelihood in order to sustain another or other more elevated achievements. Rather, work, financial success has inherent value and purpose. And this is regardless of the person's line of work. One of the most foundational ideas in Chassidus is an idea that we've discussed many, many times, and that is the idea that the ultimate purpose of our existence is to make this world habitable for God. It's a place, the physical reality is to create that the physical reality should be transparent to its inner divinity. It's a place that the entire world, we should take the mundane aspects of the world, the materialistic aspects of the world, and elevate them to holiness. And that's why God didn't just suffice with creating angels or creating spiritual realms, but rather created this physical world, this mundane world, in order for us to go ahead and infuse the materialistic world around us with holiness and make every single part of the crass world, the materialistic world, and sometimes crass world, and bring God into this reality and create a home for God in our world. And this is seen by the reality of our everyday existence. The Rebbe explained, and as we'll see soon, that the very fact that this is the system of the world shows us that this is what God had in mind. What do I mean by that? If God wanted us to be solely spiritual beings, focused on spirituality, focused on prayer, focused on Torah study, focused on 100% holiness and spirituality all day, then that's how the world would have been created, a world where we would not have to go to work. We don't have to work for 6 days a week. We don't have to work to earn a livelihood. Rather, it would come to us and we'd be able to lock ourselves up in a synagogue, in a room, wherever we are, and study and pray all day. But that isn't the system with which God created the world. God created the world with a system that we go to work to earn a livelihood, which means that is part of our day, that is part of our divine sanctioned day, that is part of our purposeful, meaningful day, is the hours we spend at work. Let's have a look in text 8 on page, the text 3 on page 8. In 1990, the Rebbe said as follows: the Torah's perspective on Jewish life is puzzling. It informs us that God chose us from the rest of humanity and spiritually elevated us from regular people. That creates the impression that we must spend the majority of our time in sacred pursuits, studying Torah, performing mitzvahs, and worshiping in the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and later in the Beis HaMikdash, the Jerusalem temple. Why then does the Torah itself establish that the majority of a Jewish individual's life is to be devoted to material pursuits, in which there is no distinction between a Jew and anyone else? The explanation is that the purpose for which God created the world is that God desired that we actively turn this material world with all its corporeality and material coarseness into a dwelling for Hashem himself. through serving Hashem in this world in accordance with the Torah that he gave us. To achieve that, the majority and the main thrust of our daily service of Hashem is not strictly spiritual activities. After all, our spiritual activities are comparable to the divine service performed by souls before they enter the world and after the return to heaven. Rather, we spend most of our time specifically on interaction with materiality. Therefore, the Torah emphasizes, for 6 years you should sow your field, etc. The idea is to bring sanctity and divinity down into our fields, the coarse realm of materiality, so as to turn our material and corporeal world into a home for God. If you think about it, most of our week is spent on the material world. Right? Even if somebody, a religious Jew in their 30s, where is most of their week? Most of their day is with materiality, not with spiritual pursuits. Most of the day, even if they pray in the morning, pray in the afternoon, pray in the evening, do their regular Torah studies throughout the day, how much of their day is focused on spirituality? Few hours. How much of their day is focused on materialism? The bulk of the day. Sleep, eating, work, and the week. Sunday through Friday, work. Shabbos, it's a day of rest. It's a day of holiness. But most of the time, it's all holiness. It's all the mundane. It's all materiality. Why? Because this is what God wanted us to do. There is purpose, there is mission in that time we spend at work that we cannot get anywhere else. And so work itself is an end in itself. It isn't only a means to an end, it's an end in itself. And what is that end? That end is to bring the holiness of Torah, the Torah's ethics and values, to bring the spirituality of ourselves, of our Torah, of our commitment to the Torah and its values into the workplace. When someone goes and they go to work and they look like a Jew and they have unique Jewish values, and despite the hustle and bustle and pressures of their office, this individual remains a person with a higher and a loftier goal, anchored in spiritual ideas and spiritual values and spiritual aspirations, being a role model for those around them, that brings the holiness and spirituality into an area of the mundane, into the area of materialism, that being the ascetic or proverbial man on top of the mountain could never attain. It brings holiness into every nook and cranny of materialism. And that's something that only by going to work can we achieve. So not only is work not a necessary evil, on the contrary, the workplace is the ultimate frontier where the greatest spiritual mission and test plays itself out. That's the first perspective from the Rebbe on our job, work, on a career. In addition, there's another benefit. In addition to work being a part of a person's personal spiritual purpose, there's an additional benefit, an additional unique opportunity, and that is the people we come in contact with through our work is something that we cannot overestimate. You see, a rabbi can only encounter that many people, right? There's some people who wouldn't go see the rabbi, wouldn't go study Torah, go reach out to study. There are people who are at work and for one reason or another will never seek out spirituality. Yet when we go to work, we have those values, we have those Torah values, we have the Jewish aspirations, we have what we look like. We have the people see us and they see what we stand for. We can encounter people at the work that other people can never encounter. And we can have a positive influence on them. And that is something that can only be attained by going to work, which is why God, a second reason why God set up the world where we can have a positive influence on others. And I'm going to share another clip on this concept.
I just started a new job in IBM, and Hey Tavis comes along, and the Rebbe says on that day that everybody should be like a shliach. I didn't know what did the Rebbe mean, everybody should be a shliach. Maybe he means that I gotta quit my job and like start becoming a campus shliach or something like that. I wrote into the Rebbe, should I give up my job for IBM? What is it that the Rebbe wants? And the Rebbe like underlines it on the answer and with a big, just one word answer, Lama. Why do you have to give up your job in IBM? I want you to stay in those things and be my shliach.
Madishem mitzad de gever kinonu, als kommt und was Ramal mit dem Matze kommt, soll dorten Schmäh von dem Mäbischten, soll dorten machen, dass in ein Leben als seinlich Schaken, bis wir Schachanti beseichern, ohne mit dich, in seine eigene Dalle Dames und danach gleich, al besser, besser mit Bachut.
And that was what I ended up doing. I stayed in IBM. I had a very, very matzliachtik career.
So if you would give a warm round of applause for Mr. Moshe Rappaport from IBM.
But I felt all the time that I was doing shlichus. In other words, I would make speeches all over the world. Your desktop or on your wall, or you're going to be wearing and so on, that are AI driven. But the real, all through my career, I would write to the Rebbe what was going on, what I was doing. Be secure. How are we going to manage the access control? Tough people, CEOs, politicians, famous journalists from all over the world came to find out what IBM was doing in research. And I got to meet all these people with my yarmulke, with my beard, and so on and so forth. The Jewish people came over to me. And it was actually a shliach in that sense.
Where officers sanctioned Hong Kong should kick competition.
You certainly know that now Hong Kong is a visiting place for many Jews from several countries. And then you can influence that during their visit in Hong Kong, when they are returning to their homes, they will bring with them additional Yerushalayim. And that will be your business also.
אני במקצועי נייבל ארכיטקט, יש לי מפעל בארץ גדול, ובזכות ברכתו מלפני שנתיים במכתב שכבודו כתב לי, שקיבלתי ממנו, קיבלנו עבודה גדולה מאוד, $2 מיליון, בצבא ארצות הברית, חודש אחרי המכתב. חודש אחרי קבלת המכתב קיבלנו את העבודה הכי גדולה בחיינו מהצבא האמריקאי.
והיא זו התחלה גדולה, ובאמת יש בכך יכול לעשות כפליים.
אני מקווה, אני משתדל, והרבה עובדים שלי שלא היו יראי שמיים, שזה קרה, חזרו בתשובה. וזה הודות לכבוד הרב.
עדיין עליך להוסיף עוד יותר בירושלים שלו, כאילו שלבחור יילו ויעשו קורליך על כל פנים החצי ממנו.
The major exhibition that we exhibited at was in Brussels. It was a major upholstery fabric international exhibition. Part of our display was knowing that if a Jew came in there, he knew he would get caught and me asking him if he could put on film. The exhibition is going to be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Rosh Hashanah was coming up Monday night. To come in for one half a day on Monday exhibition, it's a little bit crazy. On the other hand, I knew the Rebbe wanted we should always be at the exhibition, so we're going. Rabbi Chadikov let me know that the Rebbe suggested that we put up a sign at the beginning of the show that due to the Sabbath, we're going to be closed at Friday 2:30. So the customers, they'll know in the beginning of the show they should come into you right away. At about 1:30, suddenly I see a gentleman walking up and down past our stand where there's thousands of people walking. But I see he keeps looking at the sign and he's asking, tell me, what is this closing the Sabbath? It's an international exhibition. What's this closing Rosh Hashanah? I said, where are you from, sir? He says, Ich bin a Polish. So I started dealing with a Jew. I said, how about putting on film? He looks at me like I went crazy. He says, film? Who believes in all of this? I don't believe in God. I don't believe in anything. He says, Ich bin durchgegangen Hitler. I went through Hitler. I never put on film, he says. I said, my friend, I understand you 100%. Once in your lifetime, you didn't have a bar mitzvah, you said. You'll be able to say, you're right, God wasn't right to you, and you had a bar mitzvah. He took off his jacket, and we put him on film. The minute he said Shema Yisrael, he broke down and started crying. He says, Ich kenn nicht. He was holding us out, Ich kenn nicht. And he sat down, and he didn't know what to do, how to thank us. You can imagine how we felt. Business, we didn't do that much, but we knew what we came for, and we knew we were going to have a good year.
So the second spiritual purpose of a career, it's not that while you're doing business, you can also have an influence on others, but rather it's that is the purpose of the career. That is the spiritual purpose of your career, is to have a positive influence on others. As we saw in this clip that we just showed, which leads us to the third purpose, the spiritual purpose of the career. And that is as follows. Why do we work? The obvious answer to that question is to make a living, right? But why do we need to make a living? And for most people, the answer is obviously, and really for everybody to a degree, the answer is very simple: to be able to provide and hopefully comfortably to oneself and one's family. In the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe gives a different perspective. Let's have a look in text 5 on page 12. Who is like your people Israel, one unique nation on earth? The implication is that even while they engage in mundane matters on earth, they do not separate themselves from the true one. It is therefore appropriate that we do not perform all of our mundane engagements for material ends, but rather in order to bring sustenance to other souls, pieces of godliness, and supply them with that which they lack out of gratuitous kindness toward them. In doing so, we resemble our Creator, the one God, for God performs free kindness at all times, and his kindness is true not for recompense, in that he animates the universe and all its contents every single moment. In this passage, what the Alter Rebbe is expressing is an idea that is the cornerstone of the Rebbe's philosophy and outlook. And that is that our spiritual and mundane identities are intertwined. We're not any more Jewish when we go to pray in shul, or when we're putting on tefillin, or when we're lighting Shabbos candles, or we're in shul on Yom Kippur, than we are in the workplace. Every single morning, Jews around the world cover their eyes and say the Shema Yisrael. And what is the Shema? The Shema is the belief in God's oneness, the oneness of God that pervades everything. every moment in time, every location in the world, not just a shul, not just a holy place, but anywhere where we find ourselves at any moment in time, even and work in our workplace. So what happens when we open our eyes after finish saying the Shema? When we go off to work, do we forget that God is everything and everything is God? No. The Alter Rebbe is telling us here that our work is as spiritually significant as any part of our service of God. We work because we want to emulate God, and God gives, and so do we. And in order to give, we need to earn money. So in other words, it's not that we earn money and then we give charity. And according to the Alter Rebbe here, the primary reason why we go to work is in order so we can emulate God. And just as God gives us free of charge, so to speak, God gives us, He animates the world, He gives us sustenance, He gives us life. We wake up in the morning, we have blessings. God gives us, so too, we want to give and we have to give. And so we earn in order to give. And we see this perspective in a fascinating incident. In general, we see it throughout the Rebbe's writings, but we see this particular in this letter that we're going to read now. In 1959, there was a Jew, his name was Yecheskel Springer. He was a Jew that lived in Israel, and he was a turkey farmer in Kfar Chabad. Kfar Chabad is the Chabad village in central Israel. In 1970, an opportunity arose for him substantially expanding his business, and he had a dilemma. And his dilemma was, on the one hand, he's living comfortably, he's able to pay his bills, he's able to support his family, he's able to give tzedakah, he's living comfortably. But on the other hand, this is an opportunity to expand his business that will substantially grow his income, increase his revenue greatly, and in turn greatly increases his opportunity to give charity. But that would also take a lot of extra of his time, his energy, of his input, of the amount of effort he has to put. And he had this dilemma. It's going to encroach upon his Torah study. It's going to encroach upon the amount of time he's been putting aside for Torah study. And he didn't know what to do. Should he go ahead and get himself involved in this expansion of his business, or should he leave it as is? And he sought the Rebbe's advice. And the Rebbe responds to him as follows. Here's the text of the letter the Rebbe wrote to him in Yiddish, and we will read the English translation. On page 13, text 6, the Rebbe writes to Yecheskel as follows. You questioned whether it is appropriate for you to desire to further expand your income. That question has already been answered. 10% of one's earnings must be given to charity, and ideally, for those who wish to step beyond the basic requirement and enhance their observance, 20%. In fact, Rabbi Shneer Zalman of Liadi explains that it is appropriate to give even more than that. This is especially relevant now that the institutions that require our charitable support require expansion, and therefore their financial needs are constantly growing as well. Consequently, additional charity is required, and that demands greater income. In other words, it's not that we work and then we give some charity. It's that why do we go to work? In order to make the means to emulate our Creator and to give. And so if the requirements of giving are larger, then obviously that means, says the Rebbe, that we have to have greater income. And we see this in various areas, and there's a fascinating conversation that the Rebbe has with Mr. David Mintz, who's the founder and owner of the Tafudi brands, where his board wanted him to sell the business at the time. I think it was in the late 80s. They were telling him that it's not profitable and he's got to sell it. And he comes to the Rebbe and seeks the Rebbe's advice. And here's how the Rebbe responds.
So sagen, normal hier Weltstoff, was heeft zich hebben zorgen, we zo veel en mijn broer als we zo kijken.
Baptisten?
Ja, ja, also von der Seite sie trekken wir. Wir haben einen Sohn also so verkaufen. Was verkaufen die Retail Stores?
No,
Die ganze
ganze Geschäft, ja. Weil es ist erst, die Umstände sind nicht so geht. Und die Sache so, sie sagen, die Company, die Menschen, wo ich sage, es kann wachsen, ob andere Menschen kommen rein mit der Sache, ihre Geld.
Was da eine gute Sache, was da zu geben andere.
Nicht, aber so was der Rebbe ist, also...
Nein, mit das manche ist eben, ich konnte es schon aktiv verkaufen. Aber eben mit dem Geld, was sie bekommen, wird sie das investieren in ein Geschäft. Aber mit das sein weiter aktiv mit dem Lebensmittel, so geben Stocke, so geben Massagestocke. Und wie ist das, dass die gegeben also so geben Menschen schwierig aneinander.
So der Rebbe halt also verhalten eine Arbeit nach dem.
Ja, aber es ist da, muss als manche sein. Sie will Papier verkaufen. Macht mit Tees, aber mit der Maya, sie soll tegen die das, was sie bleiben bei, soll ihr das verstärken und verbrechen.
Which brings us to this idea that work, career has a spiritual purpose. The three spiritual purposes that we just discussed is number one, the first thing that the spiritual purpose of a career is that we have the opportunity to bring holiness and Torah values into the workplace. And that exemplifies the ultimate purpose of creation. And so work in and of itself, it's an end to itself for us to go to work. Secondly, by being at work, we're able to meet people and influence people, perhaps greater than anyone else can. And thirdly, the greater our earnings, the more we can give towards charitable causes. And just on a personal level, I want to mention the middle point, the workplace affording us unique opportunity to inspire other people. My father's a businessman. He live and be well. He's a businessman. And he travels far and wide for business. He just came back from a business trip now. Wherever he goes, he brings his tefillin. And he meets people that would never step foot in a shul. He meets people that would never seek guidance from a rabbi. He meets people that would never study Torah. Yet, he has the opportunity to meet them, study Torah with them, wrap tefillin with them. And these are people that would never wrap tefillin with anyone else. And so it's time and again, I see it, hearing stories from my father and many other business people where this opportunity of influencing others. I hear it from people who tell me about their, here in Shul, we have people who come to Shul on Shabbos and they tell us that they make sure to plan their calendars at work, whether they're lawyers, doctors, any other business, they plan their calendar ahead that they don't work on Shabbos and Yom Tov, on the holidays. And that in and of itself inspires others. It inspires people to think about, what does Shabbos mean? How can I better my Shabbos observance? Which leads us to an interesting question, and that is, what is Torah's perspective of retirement? In 1972, the Rebbe celebrated his 70th birthday. And there was a group of elder Hasidim who told the Rebbe that they think that now that the Rebbe's 70, he should kind of relax a little bit. Perhaps he should retire to a degree, semi-retire, and to step back a little bit because he's getting older. And so at the Chasidic gathering in honor of his birthday, the Rebbe related this incident and said, not only am I not retiring, but I'm going to increase my workload, increase my efforts. And the Rebbe announced there and then at the Chasidic gathering a new initiative to open 71 new institutions in honor of his 71st year of life. As a matter of fact, in the next year, over 140 institutions were opened by the Rebbe throughout the world, half in Israel and half in the diaspora. What's the idea that the Rebbe discussed there at the Hasidic gathering about retirement? Now that we understand that there's a spiritual purpose of a career, We bring holiness by the very virtue of us being in the career. We have an effect on those around us. Then obviously we come to a recognition that retirement is not a Jewish vow. It's not a Jewish ideal. In other words, it's not that when we reach a certain age, we should take a step back, we should slow things down. No. We have to constantly be out there. We have to constantly have a schedule. We have to constantly be doing things that put us out there. So perhaps, yes, we're retired in the sense that we're not at our job anymore. Granted. But what do we do with our time? That time shouldn't be something, hey, I'm just sitting back, relaxing and enjoying life. No. We have a mission to accomplish by being out there, by mingling, by affecting the world around us. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're productive as long as God gives us the energy to be productive. Productive in any area. If we retired from our job, but we go ahead and do a hobby that keeps us busy all day, so be it. But it needs to be something that keeps us busy. It needs to be something that keeps us on our toes. And if we're able to, stay in our job for as long as we're able to bring about these spiritual purposes of our career. And if we don't like our job, then we can move ahead, but go ahead and affect the world around us by making sure we stay active, making sure we stay purposeful, making sure we stay productive throughout the entire aspect, as long as God gives us the energy. Because if God's giving us the energy, then we have to make sure to utilize it to its fullest, because if we don't, we're absolving ourselves for our mission of which God put us here on this world. Which brings us to the second half of today's topic. But before we get to it, I just want to share another clip of various people having that conversation with the Rebbe about retirement.
Hinterland bin ich hingegangen, soll ich retiren von der soll ich hat ich soll retiren von der Business?
Das hat nicht viel getan.
Wie nennt ihr das?
Das hat nicht viel getan.
Ja, aber wie nennt ihr das?
Am liebsten, dass wir lernen nehmen.
Okay.
So von einem Wort.
Ich finde, dass wir beten für gesunden Nachfragen.
Ja, ich soll sagen, wenn die gesund haben, gesunde Kinder und haben gesunde Psyche, so haben wir doch schon viel besser. Und deswegen Retirement. Wenn wir hier Wahlwein haben, dann geht es gleich gesund, zusätzlich. Responsibility for the child, you can be active in my work. The retirement is only good for old people, for young young persons. But 220, how much money you need? 220, you have 45 years. To be good, to the best thing for you and Geschäften, that you can certainly continue it, not fast to thinking about retiring. You must gain much more money to give much more tzedakah, and to do so in good mood and good health together with your family.
And things are moving along well, and I'm not going to retire.
Yeah, thank you. Forget about it.
All right, so now we move into the second half of today's class, and that is that if we want the divine blessings in our work, in our business, just as if we want business to go well, we go ahead and seek business gurus' advice. We read books, we speak to professionals. What is the spiritual side to material success. What is the spiritual side? What are the spiritual secrets? You know, we look at books, right? There's a famous book of, what's it, The 7 Habits of, I forget what the book is, but either way, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, right? I think that's the name. Or, you know, various of these self-help books, which we read and business people read, right? Because they all want to know the secrets to business. What are the spiritual secrets to material success? And we find this concept throughout the Rebbe's correspondence with many, many people, that in order for financial success, we need to elicit divine kindness. And the way we do that is through various steps. And there are various ideas that the Rebbe suggested and the Rebbe told people to do that will bring about, you know, if you turn on a light switch, the light goes on. That's not a magic trick, but rather it's a cause and effect. So too, the Rebbe would say many, many times to various people that there are certain things that we do, which is a cause and effect for the divine blessing for material success. And so we're not going to go through all of them. We will highlight 3 examples of what are the tricks for material success. Not so much tricks, as we mentioned, but rather cause and effect. The first one is an English letter from the Rebbe. When I say English letter, it means that the Rebbe wrote it in English, sent it to whoever was the recipient. It was a letter from June 24th, 1959. This is text 7 on page 16. And what the Rebbe tells us in this letter is that, first and foremost, the idea is to have faith. If we have faith in God's blessing, that in itself is a catalyst for those blessings. Let's have a look in the letter from the Rebbe, dated June 24th, 1959. Text 7. I received your letter in which you write about your anxiety in regard to the question of parnasa, livelihood. You surely know how often our sages have impressed on us the importance of trust and confidence in God, in order that we realize that all difficulties encountered in life are only trials and tests of a passing nature. To be sure, the question of parnasa is one of the most difficult tests. Nevertheless, God does not subject one to a greater test than he can withstand. As our rabbis expressed it, according to the camel, so is its load. The very trust in God, and here's the key, is a vessel and channel to receive God's blessings. Apart from the fact that such confidence is good for one's health and disposition, and therefore is also a natural means to the desired end. So first and foremost, what is a spiritual secret to material success? Is believing in God's blessings, is knowing that God is the one in control and knowing that the blessings come from God. If we trust in God, that in and of itself is a vessel and channel to receive God's blessings. But a second point that the Rebbe mentions, and this is very important, is that if we have this confidence that we're doing what we need to do because this is how God set up the world, we're doing our part and God will do his, that itself gives us the calmness. It gives us the proper disposition and it's good for our health. And that itself is a natural means to the desired end of material success. A second point that the Rebbe mentions countless times, perhaps a spiritual directive pertinent to the workplace and to receive the divine blessings, was Shabbos observance, right? Shabbos observance can be very tough for people in work, especially people in the retail world, where lots takes place on Saturday. Other businesses are shut. People have time to shop. How can I be shut? How can I close my doors on Shabbos and Saturday, which is perhaps the most busiest shopping day of the week? How can I close my doors? But the Rebbe would highlight time and again that quite the contrary, and perhaps counterintuitively, but by closing one's doors for Shabbos, by closing the business for Shabbos, that in and of itself brings divine blessing for more success in the business. Because if everything comes from God, and God is the one who decides how much one makes, and God is the one who decides how successful one will be, It's only natural that if we follow God's rules, God will make sure that we are more successful because we follow those rules. So it doesn't matter what the world around us leads us to believe. By closing the doors on Shabbos, we are fulfilling God's commandment, and in turn, God will give us the blessings necessary. And so by closing our doors on Shabbos, sacrificing extra work for the sake of Torah and mitzvahs, it actually counterintuitively brings greater success. A third area that we see this idea we'll get to that momentarily, the third one. Let's first read a letter from the Rebbe about Shabbos observance. This is a letter dated February 13th, 1961. Page 17, text 8. It is clear to the unbiased mind and even to plain common sense that the Almighty, who is the giver of the Torah and mitzvahs, is also the creator and master of the world, whose benevolent providence extends to everyone individually. It is also equally obvious that no lasting good can come from breaking God's laws, especially such a fundamental law as Shabbos observance. For the important thing is not how much money a person earns, but that he should be able to spend it in good health and on happy things, which is entirely in the hands of Hashem. In view of the above, it is quite clear what your attitude of the businessman in question should be, even if there were no other immediate business proposition. For it is necessary without delay to give up the kind of business that interferes with Shabbos observance with the full confidence that he who feeds and sustains 3 billion people and all living things will also be able to take care of the individual and his family and provide him with a source of parnasa livelihood which should not be in conflict with the will of God. And so, in addition to Shabbos observance, increasing the blessings within the business, it also elicits God's blessings outside of work, making the revenue more valuable. And that is a point that the Rebbe stressed countless times, that yes, perhaps it seems like when you look at the numbers being open for Shabbos, or breaking any other of God's laws in order to make more money. In the bank, it looks like there's more money. There's an extra 20,000, an extra 100,000, but where is that money being spent? If that money suddenly has to be spent on a surprise emergency, yes, one can say, hey, look, I got that money, and God forbid if I didn't have the money, but now the question is from the flip side. Had one not worked on Shabbos, perhaps they would have never had that emergency. So in other words, it's not just having more funds by being closed on Shabbos, but it's also outside of work. It makes the revenue more valuable. Which brings us to one final lesson, one final Jewish observance that the Rebbe directed people to do for business success. Sorry, not one final, there's two more points. One is taking time off for Torah, because there's a mitzvah to study Torah daily. And this mitzvah applies to everyone, even one who has a demanding job. And in the Rebbe's view, this wasn't just sacrificing time. This shouldn't be seen as sacrificing work time for a different, holier cause, but rather it's a practical and helpful tool for success in the business. And the Rebbe says as much in the 1990 address to supporters of the Rebbe's Machne Yisrael Development Fund. The Rebbe highlighted the practical benefits of daily Torah study to business success. Text 9. A business person should dedicate a portion of their time each day to Torah study. Although this eats into the time that is usually dedicated to work, not only will this study not detract from their overall success, but to the contrary, Torah study clears and refines the mind to be able to make better business decisions with greater clarity and efficiency. It calms the spirit, leading to greater success in business and greater happiness in life. This phenomenon is expressed clearly in the Torah itself. If you go in my way and fulfill my commandments, I will provide rain in its optimal time, etc. When we dedicate time for Torah study, we are guaranteed divine blessings for success in a way that is optimal without stress or worry. So in other words, taking time off to study Torah, it's not taking time off. On the contrary, it is part and parcel of the business. It's what creates the business success on two fronts, both quite literally, that by taking time to study, it calms us, it calms one, it clears the mind, it refines the mind to be able to make better business decisions. But also in a spiritual sense, when we dedicate time for Torah study, we are guaranteed divine blessings in the Torah. And so what better way to start the business day, to end the business day, or to take some time when we have a quiet moment to study Torah? And the truth is, it's not only in business, it's in anything that we do in life. It's important to take time to study Torah, be it daily, which is optimal multiple times throughout the day. But in anything we do, if we're going on a trip, take some time during that trip to study some Torah. If we're doing some sort of workout or a multiple day conference or a trip or whatever it may be, make sure to take some time during that trip to study Torah, and it has these benefits as well. And lastly, a spiritual secret to material success is giving charity. What's this idea of giving charity? Giving charity is, we all believe in the value of giving charity. We all believe in the value of philanthropy. We all believe in that idea. And perhaps charity, to a degree, it hurts. To give 10%, it's a big percentage. We work hard for our money. We put our blood, our sweat, our toil into our time, our energy into making this money and giving it away to an organization, giving it away to a needy person, giving it away for a holy cause, giving it away for anything but me could be tough. But in Jewish tradition, giving charity from your earnings not only doesn't take away from your needs, but it's actually the greatest conduit for material success, and it helps you have even more. And the Rebbe would emphasize this idea of, say, the prophets mentioned countless times. The prophets even mentioned that it is the only commandment that we can actually test God and say, God, what we mean by that is, God, I'm going to give charity in order that I should make more than I am giving away. And the Rebbe would emphasize this idea about how charity actually enables us to bring in more. And the Rebbe would encourage people to set aside at least 1/10 of their net profits to charity. And the Rebbe would explain that this is for their own material benefit. Because here's the spiritual science behind this theory. When we give consistent charity from our earnings and we dedicate a percentage of our profits to a holy cause, what happens? We're now making God a partner in our business, a partner in everything that we do. And when we're looking for success, who can ask for a greater partner? We can't have a better partner than God himself. Let's have a look in text 10, page 20. It's a letter dated February 15th, 1960. I hope that from now on you will realize more fully and confidently that God is your partner in the business by virtue of the tzedakah, the charity stake in it. And of course, the larger the share of the tzedakah, the larger is the share of the partnership. So you can go boldly ahead on a broader front. I hope to hear good news from you. God is your partner, and the more you invest in God, the greater partnership he invests back in you. Let's have a look at the Rebbe giving this advice to various people. This is the final video for tonight's class.
My business has been very bad, and I hope that God you can give me a brachas.
You put a tzedakah push in your business and
Yes.
to arrange to have at least 10% given for the net income of the business to tzedakah, to charity.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, God Almighty bless you. Have good news. That will put in the tzedakah push in the business.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
אני דור 11 בישראל. אני פיתחתי נושא חדש שמאוד חשוב לי לשלמות המשפחה ולהצלחה של המשפחה. אני מבקש את ברכתך. ההנצאה היא הנצאה מאוד חשובה ויחידה בעולם.
באיזה שטח?
בשטח האלקטרוניקה. אחסון של מידע מחשבים דרך הטלפון. זו ההנצאה היחידה בעולם.
ויהי בהצלחה רבה ובשורות טובות. צריך להבטיח להשם שתיתן צדקה, בצדקה 10% מהרווח הנקי. זה ברכה והצלחה. הצלחה רבה. $1 auf Meister. Sein Begier, die Meister.
So gehen בדיוק auf den Cent.
Nein, die Parkette, wo Meister sein soll sein, nicht die Dier, auf Kolpane mit $1 mehr.
So mehr wie Meister.
So in other words, what the Rebbe was telling us here in this video, telling these people, and the Rebbe shared in the correspondence countless times to countless people, was the idea that charity is necessary. Giving 10% is necessary, even when a person is in difficult financial straits and seemingly doesn't have the means to give. In various letters, the Rebbe writes to people that if they are not able to give 10% of their profits at the moment, they should at least give a little bit of that 10% number, write down the remainder as almost an IOU to God. And the Rebbe would say, give it to whatever your favorite charity is. Just make sure you give it to a charity. Give it to God. Give it to your favorite charity, whatever it is. But set it aside, write it down if you're not able to give it now, because on the contrary, financial challenges is a way of God testing a person, whether they would continue to give tzedakah. And the Rebbe told people that if one continues giving charity even during financial challenges, then suddenly it will break through and God will give them tremendous blessings in the area. And that's why, as the Rebbe mentioned to the first person in the video, the Rebbe mentioned that more than just giving charity, it should become a fixture in our lives. And so the idea isn't just once in a blue moon to give charity, but rather to have a charity box, or a pushka in Yiddish, tzedakah box, a charity box, and have the charity box in our homes, in our offices, in our cars, and utilize that charity and muscle. Constantly put money in the charity box, in your home, in your office. When people would come to the Rebbe for a blessing for a new office, for a new business, the Rebbe would say, make sure there's a charity box in the office, and the Rebbe would give them $1. This would be the first dollar in that charity box. I'm making you an emissary to put this dollar in that charity box. Encouraging people countless times to make sure that they have a pushka installed in the workplace, a pushka installed in the home, a pushka, a charity box installed even in one's car. And that would ensure that charitable giving becomes a fixture of one's life. It encourages not just oneself, but when people see a charity box, it encourages other people to give charity. It becomes a symbol of a Jewish home that we give charity, and it anchors our priorities as a person and as a business person, communicating to us and to those around us that our primary responsibility is to our Jewish identity and to our heritage. Now we get back to, this brings us back to the question that we began at the beginning, and that is, why would people come to the Rebbe for these questions? Why would people seek the Rebbe's advice? If the Rebbe wasn't a doctor, why would they seek the Rebbe's advice on medical areas, as we'll see soon? As the Rebbe wasn't a business guru, why did people come to the Rebbe for business advice? And as we saw here, it's people from all walks of life. If the Rebbe wasn't a law professor, why would the Rebbe people come to the Rebbe for legal advice? And the answer is, as we see it in the Torah, when a house is built, the architect draws up a blueprint. Then he takes the blueprint and he gives it to the contractor. And what does the contractor do? The contractor then tells the plumber how to do the plumbing, the mason how to do the masonry, the electrician how to do the electrical work. It's not that the contractor can do the tasks better than everybody, but you know what the contractor could do? He can read the blueprints better than everybody. And that's why he can give the instructions. The Zohar tells us that the Torah is the blueprint for the world. So the Rebbe's advice didn't stem only from business acumen or from legal knowledge or from medical knowledge, which the Rebbe had as well. But the Rebbe's advice stemmed primarily from a deep understanding of the blueprint of the world, of the Torah, and the conviction that everything has a source in the Torah. And if everything has a source in the Torah, then who better to go to than the contractor who can read the blueprint? Who better to go to for advice for anything in the world? Because if everything is, the Torah is the blueprint for the entire world, then it's a blueprint for legal matters, it's a blueprint for medical matters, it's a blueprint for business matters, it's a blueprint for anything. So who better to go to for advice on all these matters, not just for a blessing, but for literally for advice, than the Rebbe, who's able to read that blueprint of the Torah and give advice based on the Torah. This is why people came to the Rebbe regarding all areas of life, because they recognized that the Rebbe's advice stemmed from this deep understanding of the blueprint of the world, of the Torah, and thereby having the best advice for everyone. All right, we'll conclude with the overview of the lesson. Next week, we will talk about family relationships and education, a healthy home environment, and everything that comes along with that, and the Rebbe's advice on those topics. We'll have the overview of tonight's class, and then we'll open it for question, answer, and discussion.
Lesson 1. Meaning at Work. 1. People consulted with the Rebbe regarding all areas of life in the belief that his advice stemmed from a deep understanding of the Torah. 2. Work is not just a necessary means of obtaining a livelihood to sustain more elevated achievements, but it has inherent value and purpose. God designed the world in a way that we are forced to spend the majority of our time engaged in work because bringing holiness and Torah values into the mundane workplace is the ultimate purpose of creation. 3. The workplace also affords us unique opportunities to inspire others to be better people. And earning money enables us to partner with God by giving charity to others. 4. The Rebbe was critical of retirement, seeing that work is our means of fulfilling our life purpose. 5. Spiritual investment holds the secret to success in all areas of life, including financial. The Rebbe emphasized the importance of faith in God, Shabbat observance, setting aside time for Torah study, and giving charity as keys to financial success.